Is this a real piece, Lily?
Yes, I received that when my dad died last year. And
Has it? Did it grow that big, or it was already?
yeah,
And
it
it's
was a
in
little
bloom.
smaller. It was a little smaller, but still it had some size to it. I actually just pruned it when I got home from work today because there's a lot of dead stems on it.
How long has it been in bloom?
It's been in bloom probably for about a month. We noticed that one kind of popped up about a month, started to pop up about a
Isn't
month
it
ago.
always the best when you
Yeah.
when the flower comes? It's just
Yeah,
it's
it's
a
like, oh,
promise
okay, you're
to
still
me.
there.
To
Like,
me, it's like, oh, it's like a promise. You came back.
yeah, like I must be doing something right. I'm trying to have like a green thumb, and I've been failing every year, but I always keep trying.
My mom had my great grandmother's peace lily, from 2008 up until 2022.
Wow.
And they're not even supposed to live that long.
Okay, I didn't even know that.
No, like I don't even think that's the lifespan of it, but she kept it going for a good
I'm
bit.
trying to hold on to this one. My sister took some of the other ones, and I'm just surprised that it's been lasting this long. All right. So we're recording and we're again double check because I can hear them. Okay. Is it Shelby Lane or Shelby Wormley? I noticed there's two different names.
Yeah, because my artist name for a while was Shelby Elaine, but I'm
Okay.
kind of like just going by just Shelby Wormley.
Okay.
Because sometimes it just depends on which areas.
Okay, I got
Because when
you.
I would do like my poetry and stuff, it would be Shelby Lane, but now I'm more so going by Shelby Speaks because I've been told I gotta.
Oh, okay. So
It's
now
my it's my Instagram handle name, and when I would go up for open
yeah,
mics,
you're right. Okay, yeah.
Sir Dominique Jordan would always be like, and Shelby Speaks. I'm like, that's just my Instagram name, but I guess I can use that as my poet name. But Shelby Wormley, because that's just who I am, and it encompasses all of those
Shelby
things.
Speaks, Shelby Wormley, Shelby Elaine. There's a lot of different aliases here.
Yeah, it depends on which like stage
Yeah.
in life. Like Shelby Elaine for a while I felt like that was the artsy side of me, versus for Shelby Wormley, like when I'm dealing more so with business or professional, it's
Yeah.
it'll be that like people don't associate Shelby Elaine with We&Company, but like Shelby Wormley,
Okay.
So, but for or sometimes just Shelby. I like just Shelby.
Shelby, yeah. Yeah, but you can comfortably respond to any, like if somebody were to be like Shelby Speaks, it's
one's new.
That's a new one for you?
Yeah, that one's new. But I would more so probably only hear it in like maybe an open mic setting.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I just made the decision in the last few months to lean a little bit more into.
Okay, yeah, because let's start here then, because I was obviously We&Company I want to get into, and we were just talking about storytelling, but is this poetry? Is this not new, or is okay? But pushing it more, is that new? The venture of doing that more, or no? Like, because I was kind of not aware of that part.
Yeah. So well, actually, if I go back to where it came from, I was at a writing retreat last year, and I had asked the host if I could share one of my pieces because it was about riding to heal. The retreat was called Riding to Heal, and I asked if I could share a poetry piece, and this girl yelled out after I did my poem. She was like, "Oh, she speaks."
Okay.
And she kept saying, Shelby speaks, y'all, because I'm not quiet, but I'm more so just observant.
Gotcha.
And it takes me a second to just process things. So when you first interact with me, it can kind of come off as me being quiet, but I wouldn't consider myself a quiet person.
Gotcha.
But she said Shelby speaks, and then I was like, kind of like the sound of that. And I was like, you know what? I only changed it because I was photo B13 on Instagram since I made my account. I had never changed my name. I was like, I think I'm gonna just change my name to Shelby Speaks instead.
Yeah.
But I don't remember the woman's name who said it, but it was actually it was like something kind of clicked. And I'm like, yeah, I should lean into that more. I speak a lot through the work and the art that I create, but verbally speaking. So I love poetry. Not even just poetry. I call it free writes. I love to write, and I love spoken word, that whole world. That's like a whole nother part of me, but I love to write. So while I like to express myself through various mediums, I feel like when I hear Shelby Speaks, it's a call and it's a push for me to use my voice more. And it's more so kind of for me too, because a lot of the work I do, it involves a lot of other people and their stories and their voice. So in this little corner over here, I have my poetry and writings and everything.
I like it. That's pretty cool. Creatives often, the people that I've interviewed, especially in the creative side, that typically tends to be one way or another. Like poetry, like comes into play when they're like creative through art, one way or another. Poetry seems to always kind of find its way in there, and I've always, not that I found it odd, because me myself as well, I tend to kind of like not dabble in poetry, but with lyrics and words and music once upon a time. So I get it. Especially like when we were just talking about storytelling and having to listen to and engage with somebody else and listen to their story. It is nice every now and then to kind of like remind yourself, like, I too have that story. Voice. Yeah, I have a story, and you can kind of get lost in like not honoring it, if that makes any sense. Yeah. Do you feel the same way?
Yes. And it's funny, someone was actually just today had reminded me of parts of my journey I hadn't thought about in a while. They met me a couple years ago when I did an art installation. It was like this walking tour. I printed out these photos and quotes went along with it. And they're like, I remember seeing you and I could tell you were, you were good at what you did and you were confident in that, but I could tell you were a little afraid to step into your power. And so to see where you're at now, like you're walking in it. And I was like, thank you for that reminder, because, a couple years ago, I was actually very afraid of my power. I was very afraid of my light. One of my favorite quotes is you ever hear of Our Deepest Fear quote by Marianne Williamson?
No.
You ever see Coach Carter?
Yes. It's been a long time, but yeah, I remember
Our
that
deepest fear is not that we are inadequate. Our deepest fear is that we are powerful beyond measure. It is our light, not our darkness, that most frightens us. And I had a friend tell me, he's like, you need to remember this. Like, he's like, I want you to memorize this poem and just remind yourself of it. And I had realized for a long time I was afraid of that, because in the last decade plus of my life, I've been photographing people, photographing events. Photography is my first love. Like that's where it all started for me, was photography. So I would hide behind my camera a lot. I didn't know it was hiding back then. I wouldn't have called it hiding necessarily. It was really how I navigated the world. And it's how I saw so many different ways people could live. And it really taught me a lot about the world. But as I got older, I started realizing that it was a way for me to hide. And I noticed it in my self-portraits, because in my self-portraits, the camera is my face. Like, you don't see my face. You just see the camera in my face.
Gotcha. Yeah.
The classic ones. And my friends would say, Shelby, stop hiding, like show your face, or, you need your photos taken too. And you have a story as well. And for a while, I very much was in the lane of, I'm just here to witness this. I'm just here to capture this. And not realizing, hey, I have a story too. I can tell my story, and I've seen a lot. I got plenty of stories. But I was afraid of it. And I think once I started exploring other mediums that I was just curious about and learning, oh, I'm decent at this, and I'm decent at this, and I can do all these things. I can be all these things. I can be a multifaceted artist. I can have different dimensions, and it's okay. I don't need to be this one thing and be in this one box.
Yeah, I think I always wonder why do we do that as people, like kind of like hide away from embracing something that's, like you said, the power. I always feel like there's like my wife, she'll always be like you have this talent ABC. Like, I don't have talents, and I'm like, everybody's got talents, baby. But when I hear her say that, it reminds me, like, there's times where I have a difficult time like really acknowledging, like you said, I'm decent at this. There's times where I'm just like, I'm actually really nice at this. I know I am, but I don't like embracing I'm kind of wondering if I need to turn off this fan. Sorry.
You probably. Yeah, you're going to have to.
Regret it. Give me a second.
It's okay.
I forgot I had this.
Look, we're both in production. I heard it. I'm like,
As soon as it turned on, I said,
But I'm like always afraid to kind of like embrace the things that I'm good at, because I don't know if I feel like I don't like coming off like cocky or conceited, or I'm scared to be like, yeah, I'm really nice, and then I realize I screw it up, or something. Mm-hmm. It's always like the humanity of it is like the other shoe will fall, if Murphy's Law, that whole thing. So I always have a hard time with that whole concept. So when you say like hiding behind or acknowledging the power and embracing it, I relate to that 1000%. And I think a lot of creatives that realize I'm really gifted in this, and then you can easily start exploring other mediums, and you're like, I actually really, not that you're good at it, but it just comes easy. It's like, I feel guilty for saying that too. When you decided, like, what were some of the other mediums that you started playing around with, and you were realizing that you were decent at that as well? You said photography. Mm-hmm. Is that when spoken word kind of came into there as well? Was there other things?
So I got into, so I've always loved writing since middle school.
Okay.
I really fell in love with spoken word poetry freshman year. I was really into Brave New Voices at the time, put on through HBO.
Yeah.
Josh Bennett, one of my favorite poets. Jasmine Mans, like the whole Brave New Voices crew, like that just opened my world. And then locally at the time, there was a poetry group called Word Wide based out of York that really created a space, and I was able to express myself a lot that way. So writing's always been something, like, it's been more so for me. Okay. Just, writing down my thoughts. I'd write short stories. But I would say out of the different mediums I've been able to explore. So like I mentioned, I do photography. I write, watercolors. I love watercolors. Yeah. It's helped me. I'm a recovering perfectionist, I like to say. So with watercolor, you can't control it. Like you literally have to go with the flow, and it kind of does its own thing. And it's really helped me release this idea of perfection and having to control things, because like it was really intense a couple years back. But I would say the most that has been very healing for me and has surprised me a lot is that I play the piano as well.
Okay. And
I say I play the piano as literally like I play. Same way how you play a game, you play. I won't say I play it professionally, because there's different. If you tell somebody you play the piano, they think you know classical.
There's different levels.
There's levels to it. But I'm like, it's just playing. I sit down and I just play, and we associate playing you know, as this like childlike thing, but that's something we all still
Yeah.
have. And during the pandemic, it was 2020. I was still working for the news at the time, and our offices got temporarily placed in a piano sanctuary, or no, a piano conservatory. And so I'm in this building just full of pianos. And while my coworker would write the scripts, I would have to just wait. So I would just go into the piano rooms and just play around. And one day I just started flowing. And I've always loved and admired the piano. It was always beautiful, and I always wanted to learn how to play. Yeah. And I know how to play Lean on Me. My sister taught me how to play that when I was very small. It's just a couple notes, but I never took lessons or anything like that. But I don't know, I would just sit, and it would just flow. It always felt like whatever my soul is trying to say, it comes out. And I usually don't know what I'm playing until I listen back. And I'm like, oh, that's how you was feeling, Shelby. Okay. But it's really just like a release. And I get cramps now in my hands because I don't play the proper way. I play with my knuckles a little bit.
Okay.
But I love it. I have a piano at home that was gifted to me. And that has been such a saving like grace for me, because it's helped me navigate a lot of hard times where I don't always have the words. I don't always have a picture. There's nothing I can paint. So that's another way to just kind of get out how I feel.
Even listening to a piano is a piano and a guitar are like two instruments that I always wished I knew how to play, because it's like you said, you have a piano. I always felt like it'd be cool just to be like, I just want to go in the room and play something and play it, like something beautiful to like, just because I'm feeling whatever I'm feeling. And like the ambiance that it creates in the room, like other people appreciate it. And it's like, that's just a cool gift to give like the people around you. It's like the gift of music, but through a piano. Or like, let me pick up a guitar, and while we're talking, I'm just going to play something that's, you know, I don't know, because I know how to play. Mm-hmm. And it's like, I always wish I could do that, because obviously I don't, but my dad could play guitar. And I remember as a kid, I just always thought, that's just so cool. Like, how do you do that? Like, so for it to come through you like that, I think that's a cool thing to have. Like you said, when you're feeling what you're feeling, sometimes you don't have the words. Just playing it's therapeutic, I'm sure, right?
It's very healing. And I learned through my neighbor, because before I had a piano, I would go to his house, and his wife would let me play the piano. And I learned I was playing like the pentatonic scale, they call it. So it's just the black keys.
Okay, yeah.
I only know how to really play the black keys, but really no matter which keys you hit, like it just sounds pretty.
Yeah.
So I tell people, I'm like, these are just the thing. I was like, you can hit these two and it sounds so nice. So but it's been very, very healing. And I would like post videos online of me playing, and that's how I was gifted the piano.
Okay.
The mix had a piano they just had sitting around. They're like, hey, we know you play, would you like this? It's this beautiful white piano. Her name is Pearl River. That's the name of the actual piano, but it's Pearl. So
there
me and
go.
Pearl, you know, I know I'm not doing good if I haven't been on the piano in a while.
Okay.
So it's also like a check-in for me too.
Yeah. That's pretty cool though. So you got the name for it already. It's a part of.
I name a lot of my inanimate objects.
Yeah.
My camera's name is T'Challa.
Yeah. What's that?
My camera's name is T'Challa.
Okay, I see. I never even named my cameras. I never thought of that. I like that. Where about then does I know, like, I want to get into We&Company, but I also remember you sharing, I think it was on LinkedIn, you had shared like the time when you were a photojournalist and how you took this jump. I think it was a year or so ago. You were kind of like reflecting back and like, can you talk to me about that time, and was that time what propelled you into We&Company? And if not, if you wouldn't mind just sharing that for me anyway.
Yeah, definitely. So it's funny because I was like, oh, I'm always wondering where to start.
Yeah,
in the story. But to rewind a little bit back,
Sure.
I got my first camera in the 7th grade. I wanted to be like the girl off of Rocket Power.
Okay.
I loved Rocket Power. I wanted a skateboard and a video camera. And I also loved the movie True Confessions. It was the first movie I saw Shia LaBeouf in.
Okay.
And his sister had a video camera and she did a documentary on her brother. So that really just intrigued me. And in high school, you know, my performing arts teacher would let me create little short videos and everything. But Jordan and I, we also discovered we both got cameras when we were in middle school. So we've both always had a love for storytelling and for videography in a way. And as we, you know, we would kind of just talk about, you know, what are some of our goals? I would do my own like photography on the side. And one day, you know, Jordan and I were just like, we should just do this together. Because I always felt like there was something missing when I, like in my business, when I was just solely doing photography, but I love storytelling and I wanted to incorporate that, and I want to incorporate more video. Jordan also has a background in video production as well.
Okay.
And so we both had such similar backgrounds. It made sense. And we both had the same passion for it. So I would say probably 2018, 2019 is when we really started to combine that and see, okay, what could this look like? And what is it that we need to do to make this happen? So the journey in itself with We&Company, I would say probably started 2018, 2019. You know, we went to SCORE. We did the business classes, like the beginner classes. And at that time, you know, we didn't even have a name. We had a couple different names before We&Company, but we just knew what we wanted to do. Knew we wanted to help people tell their story. We just struggled to articulate that in, you know, like the 30 seconds pitches
Sure.
they usually try to get you to do.
Yeah.
But our big takeaway from that time was our name for our website, which is WeShareYourStories.com. We're like, let's just tell people what we do. Super easy. And that really kind of started the journey back then. But so I would say January of 2020 is when we officially launched, like we went public, but we had done all the paperwork and everything in 2019. But we had a lot happen in that year, so that we couldn't launch. A lot of, you know, when life just happens.
Yeah.
We had bought all this gear. We had got all this stuff. We were working on our website. But we didn't actually go public till almost 9+ months later. And I remember our website developer saying, she's like, everything doesn't have to be perfect. You don't need to have the answers to everything. You just got to start. So when we started in 2020, obviously it's 2020.
Yep.
And we at that point, I believe we were doing, we had done a project with we did the Woman of Color luncheon, I believe. And we did a project with the city for Black History Month. And then as it goes, then March 2020 comes, and everything shuts down.
Yeah.
But people still wanted to connect. People still wanted to share and tell their stories. So people were still contacting us to do work. So I would say fast forward to around the summertime. I'm still working. I used to work for ABC 27.
Okay.
I'm a former news photojournalist, so I worked in broadcast news for close to 7 years right before I left. And at the time, I was working for ABC 27, so I'm doing pandemic coverage. I'm out and about. I'm everywhere. There, I was still out working out in the field.
Gotcha.
And fast forward to the summer with George Floyd and Breonna Taylor and so many other names.
Yeah.
And the protests happening in Lancaster. So I was covering those. I was covering the protests, and at the same time, still managing the business. You know, we're still very new at all of this. And I remember just being so exhausted. I was so exhausted that year, especially that summer. working crazy hours and just being out covering not just the protests, but also we're still covering like COVID deaths and the things that are happening in the county. And it was a lot.
Yeah.
I felt a lot of pressure at the time too, because at that time I was the only Black woman photographer covering the Susquehanna Valley, really, but especially in Lancaster. And there was just a lot of pressure there to show up for my community, to make sure the stories that need to be told were being told.
Right.
And I remember my friend saying, like, girl, you got your own platform now.
Mm-hmm.
You know, you have your company. You don't have to beg for them to see, because you have the power to do that with what you have. And I remember kind of just getting to my rope's end. Jordan and I had watched Hamilton. This is really important, okay?
Okay.
We were watching Hamilton. It was in July. And I don't know if you saw Hamilton.
I have not, to be honest.
Okay.
I want to, but I haven't.
Oh, it's so great. Well, there's a song at the end, and not to give anything away.
No,
but
don't worry about that.
They pose the question of, well, who tells our stories? Who tells our stories? I remember being like, I do. I tell the stories. And I think that was a moment where I was like, I gotta quit my job. Like it had been, the thought came definitely that summer of, I don't know how much longer I see myself doing this, because what it was doing to me mentally. But after watching Hamilton, it was a lot of other things, but after watching Hamilton, I'm like, yeah, I gotta do this. And especially it was such a historic time at that time.
Right.
And some things you need to move with an urgency with certain things. Some things you can't take your time with. Some things you need that urgency. And I could just feel it in my soul of like getting closer to making that jump. And so I made the decision in July, I'm going to quit my job, but it took me 2 months to work up the courage to actually put my notice in.
Gotcha.
And it came down to, we were presented with an opportunity to do some work for the YWCA. And I had to make a decision, because there was no way I could work my job and do this project and do it justice the way it needed to be. I needed the time and the freedom and the flexibility. And I felt like this internal window closing of like, if you don't make this decision now, it may never come back around. Or who knows, the next time it will come back around where you'll have the courage. And I remember telling people in my community, hey, I'm thinking about leaving. And people were like, oh, we're going to support you. There's work for you. We got you. And some people were like, don't. Some people felt like I could make more change with me through working in the news.
Yeah.
And because by the time towards the end, I was able to produce. It took me years. Like, I felt like I was finally at the top, not the top, but I was elevating. I'm like, I was able to produce. I was able to win an award for something I produced. And I'm like, I worked so hard all these years to get here, and I'm just gonna like
turn around and
jump
walk away.
ship.
Yeah.
And kind of start over in this world of entrepreneurship. So it was really scary, but I knew in my soul and my being that this was the right choice, and I had no other choice but to do it, to believe that it would work, because I'm like, well, my father-in-law would always say, he's like, well, if it doesn't work out, you can always get another job.
That's the thing too.
Like, you can always get another job. You're talented, you're smart, but see where this goes. And Jordan and I, like, we had to talk through a lot of things.
Because that's not an easy decision to, even though it was an easy decision to make, it's not an easy decision to make, if that makes sense.
Oh, not at all.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, it's like easy to go, yeah, absolutely, this makes sense. And then it's like, wait, you know what I mean? Because you're right. All those years that it took for you to get that, all that kind of like, it's like, what was I doing all this for? But at the same time, what was happening at that moment was unprecedented in our lifetime. I feel, to see everything that was taking place. I talked to coincidentally, I just spoke with Dr. Kamika Campbell from Black News Beat, and she was going through her story, pretty much in a nutshell. Everything that took place, the pandemic, the protests, was a catalyst to get her to where she didn't know she was going to be at. And it's almost like what you just said kind of nailed it on the head for me, or like this internal window is closing. There's something that I need to do now. It only makes sense now. And if I don't do it now, will I have that courage? Will it make sense to do it again? And will that come around? All these different questions, I'm sure, are swirling through your head. That's what makes it difficult to kind of be like, yeah, I want it, because it's almost like there's so many different, sometimes you just got to do it. That sense of urgency that you mentioned is really, you don't have to think about it. You just got to do it. And like what your father-in-law said is something that I've heard, and I try to teach my wife, and I tell ourselves that all the time. Like, there's times where we're going to try something. If it don't work, somebody said, you can just go get another job then. And it's like, you're right. Like, I'd rather fail at what I'm trying to do and at least say, the hell with it. At least I tried it. And I'll just go back to doing, otherwise I'll do this and never know what could have been.
And that's the thought of, I knew that I didn't want to live with the thought of what if. I feel like you should, the only times you should be asking, like, what if, is, what if I did this? What would happen? Or what if I chose to be brave in this area? But not like, what if in a sense of, well, if only I would have, not from a place of regret.
Right.
And it didn't sit well with me, and it wasn't just my decision. Me and Jordan had to talk about it, and he was not in the beginning. He was like, I don't know, it's a pandemic. It's a pandemic. People are losing their jobs left and right, and I always like to tell people, it sounds nice when I say, oh, I left my career to pursue creative entrepreneurship full time and to run our company. But at the time when I did that, Jordan was still working at his job. So there still was at least that sense of security. Some people do that and it's not there, it's
1,000%.
So I think it's important to say that of, now we are doing it both of us are doing our company full time, and it's a whole different ball game now. But, I'm like, the courage I had back in 2021, when I was so curious, because I had no choice but to believe. And I felt like, to me, it's really important to talk about fear, because I felt like, I faced fear. I faced this fear of quitting, and I did it. But then I'm thinking, all right, well, I conquered fear, but no, it just shows up in so many other different ways in different places, and realizing, oh no, you have to keep conquering this thing. Like, it's not just like, oh, I did it. It's always going to be another mountain. It's always going to be something else. So realizing to have that like fortitude to kind of keep.
What's the fear that you're willing to live with? Like, I feel like you just said, the fear of I could make this jump, but I'm gonna lose the security, and I work so hard, and I don't know. Or the fear of, let me get into there, and then there's a whole other set of things that I have to. But I need to get here to acknowledge that fear is there. If that makes any sense. Like, it's always going to be there, but I would rather face the new fear that's coming, because I'm making these strides and I'm pushing, as opposed to just kind of staying stagnant and avoiding the fear and being safe in my bubble, so to speak, and not make that I feel like some people, and I'm speaking of myself, have done that for so long, where it's like that decision to kind of finally be like, that takes a lot. Like, kudos to you. And during the pandemic and everything that was taking place with the protests, one of the things that I'm thinking of is like, what's going on with you, somebody that is already loving to tell stories and embrace the storytelling, the art of it. What's going through you emotionally as a photojournalist, that this is impacting you one way, knowing that there's this wanting and need to represent and be present in another way. But then on the same token, everything's hitting you just the same as it's hitting everybody else in real time. Like what's going through your mind?
Well, I actually remember I called the general manager at the time. And I just went off. I just went off on him because it's just in the midst of protest. I'm like, y'all got me out here going live for 3+ hours. I haven't eaten. Like, y'all don't care about me. And I'm like, y'all are telling me, oh, you want me to get this, and this. I'm like, but y'all are failing to see, like, I am them too.
Yeah.
I grew up going to protests. My mom organized protests in York every year for 10 years, the Unity March in York City. She always taught me the importance of advocacy and speaking your mind, standing on what you believe in. I went to my first protest when I was maybe in 96, 97. And saying that makes me feel so old.
Hey, I graduated in 98, so don't worry about it.
Oh, okay. I was like 5 or 6 or something, or maybe 6 or 7. But that's when I went to like my first protest. And so I remember telling the GM, like, I'm a Black woman.
Yeah.
We're out here in these streets screaming, our lives matter, Black lives matter. Like I am them too. And it's really hard for me to separate myself right now. Like it's hard. If I wasn't here, I'd be out here too. And that was kind of like a big click for me. And I had spoken about the pressure that I had just felt, because again, when I would show up during that time, I was obviously welcomed, but it wasn't like I would have to like get people off my reporters sometimes, like, yo, like chill, you with me, it's cool. But it was exhausting. Honestly, that whole time's kind of a blur. I remember not sleeping,
I would think,
for days, and but also I was seeing, it was to me at that time being able to witness the different stages, because I got to witness it in so many different stages, in the morning, at night, midday, on the weekend, in the middle of the week. I got to see how so many different communities and groups came and showed up, and everyone didn't see that. I remember when businesses started boarding up their shops, and Harry the teller, rest in peace, Harry. I remember him saying to me, he was like, I'm not boarding up my shop. This is my community and they know me. I'm not doing that. And then you see all these other shops that may have been on the block a couple years or something, maybe didn't have that connection. They boarded up. And I remember just being like, well, that's interesting. Right. Or it was the first time I seen that many Black people at once too in Lancaster, because so many of us at that summer were like, where are you been at? You been here this whole time?
Right, yeah, I never thought about that part.
Where have all of y'all been?
Yeah.
So there was just like these meetings, like so many lives changed. And when you think back to it now, some people, it's funny because some people will call it the summer riots, right?
Okay.
And some people will say, oh, summer protest. It just
depends
who you're talking to. But I'm like, I was there, and I not just to witness it, but I captured it, and it just changed me so much. And I just remember realizing, you know what? It felt like screaming into a void in a lot of ways, but even when it came to the news, I'm like, we can talk about ratings and all this stuff. I was able to produce like a special where I was able to bring some protesters on and have different people speak on different things, but I'm like, I can do so much more and have so much freedom and control over here with the platform Jordan and I were building. And I remember just getting to a point where I didn't like how they were handling our stories. I didn't like how just the lack of empathy, the lack of dignity. So I was like, I'm not giving all of myself to this industry anymore. And at the time, I was concerned of, I spent all these years working up, being able to do this, but it wasn't for nothing. Mm-hmm. I learned so much over the years. I started out as a production assistant, like changing batteries out of microphones.
Gotcha.
And running scripts to people. And eventually became an editor, and then a photog, a news photojournalist, and I covered sports. So, but I was able to take something from each position that I had. So when I think about, okay, how I envision the company that Jordan and I are building and what we want that to look like, we're leaning on a lot of these things that we learned in the industry and want to share in that. So I know it wasn't a waste, and I covered anything. I would say one day I could be doing a car crash or a house fire, or my favorite was like a ladybug release at a preschool.
Okay.
But I've also covered like murder suicides and only a couple active shooter situations. But not the average person can say that. And I say it so casually. There's a whole different world, like news world. And I do miss that sometimes. I do miss being around other newsies that kind of just get it.
Yeah.
But it was also, there is this shield that goes up when we would show up to any scene to be able to do our job. I've shown up on people's worst days, and I still have to do my job. I still have to capture this. And I started realizing, okay, how can I do this, but still with dignity though? And in news, they don't always really prioritize that. I feel like sometimes. So I learned a lot, and I still reflect on it now. Like, it's hard to think it's been 4 years since I've been out, but when I first left, I struggled mentally so much. And I realized through therapy how, because every day was bam, 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 there was no time to process what the
Talk
things
about covering everything that there was no time for you to embrace really what was going on.
Because it was always the next story. So once I was out of it, it was kind of like running into a brick wall. Yeah. Where I had to process it.
That's something that I don't think a lot of people consider, is the people that are covering the news one way or another, what that does to you psychologically. Like, and having to kind of like, now we move on, but then you go home and you're still kind of like dealing with what you're dealing with, having to turn it off and turn it on. Couple that with the fact that you're obviously getting hip to the fact that the news, the powers that be that are in control of the news aren't really looking at it the same way, or maybe being empathetic or sympathetic. There's a lack of it. When I talked to Marquise Lepton, who's real cool, Marquise, and when I talked to him the first time, he brought this up in his own way, his own journey about the news and how they tell the story, and it just didn't really jive with what he wanted to do. And I think what's really cool is like when you can have an experience like that and you can take it, like you said, nothing was a waste. It was all for something, because you can, even that, you can take it and be like, this is what I don't want to do. I've already seen that. So then my assumption then is We&Company really was that fuel for the fire to really give that everything that you wanted? Yeah.
Oh, definitely. Because with news, so we have packages, VOSOTs, VOs, special stories. So a package it might be a minute 30 story. A VOSOT might be 30 seconds to a minute. Video over sound over tape. So that stands for.
Okay.
So you see the video playing, and then it goes to a soundbite of someone speaking. But we all these big things broken up into these tiny micro bites for us to digest maybe or process. And I think I've just had so many lessons, because I can speak on, okay, the things I learned tangibly and the things I've learned industry wise. But when we talk about just humanity and the things I've learned just about our communities and cultures and how people show up, I've witnessed a tornado kind of flew through Denver, right? Yeah, Denver. It was a couple years back. A little tornado came through. It wasn't little. It was big because it destroyed a lot of homes.
I think I remember that.
Yeah, and wiped all these homes out. And there was a group of Amish people that just came and just rebuilt. Nobody called them, asked them they just showed up. And just how thankful that community was, or just showing up to different cultural celebrations. I don't know. I've just been able to see so much. And so sometimes I'm like, no, but this deserves more than that 30 seconds or the things that are prioritized. So, they say if it bleeds, it reads. And very similar to what Marquise had shared, how there was so much left out. There wasn't any dignity in it. There was no empathy in it. And I knew that when Jordan and I started We&Company, we wanted to tell people stories their way. Like, that's one of our slogans is your story, your way. And we have a whole process, and we do our best to always honor those stories to the best of our abilities, to tell it in a way that is respectful and honorable, and that gives your story the respect that it deserves. So I knew that we were going to take more time.
Okay.
I wasn't as concerned as producing these 30-second, 1 minute clips and everything like that. I'm like, no, we're going to give this the time and stuff that it needs. And if this is a vital part to their story, for the sake of time, I don't think it's fair to just, we're not going to include that if that's a big chapter or piece of it. But we've definitely taken the lessons we've learned working in the broadcasting world to what it is that we do. And we're in year 4 now.
Yeah.
Currently. But it's been a process of even learning what our process looks like. And also as we grow and as we mature, that changes. But yeah, no, We&Company's it's our baby.
Yeah.
It's definitely our baby, and it's grown. We're really happy about the support that we've been able to get over the years, and it's just a testament to no, actually this is needed. There's not a lot of Black and brown storytellers here.
Yeah. And
it also made me realize, I actually know a little bit more than I thought I did.
Right.
Coming from News World, I didn't realize, because I experienced that and saw how that works, I actually know how we can do that over here. And when you mentioned about, working in all these different spaces and mediums, I think I'd finally come to a place where I could really step in my power, right?
Yeah.
I could step into the things that I was confident of and sure of. I can talk to you about photography for days. I'll tell you the history of photography.
Yeah.
I can go on and on. So I feel confident with that. I can do that. There's a lot of things I can speak about, gaining confidence in being like an entrepreneur. Because one thing my sister told me, my sister is also, she's a CEO. She's an entrepreneur as well. She's like, there's a difference between being an entrepreneur and being a boss. And I'm like, you know what? I'm still learning how to manage myself.
Yeah. I got you.
Managing myself, and Jordan and I are constantly like, are we doing this right? Or we're really just winging it. But they were impressed by this, and that was a barely effort. So imagine if we really went all in. And I think a part of us were both, we went through our parts of being afraid, confused. It's not just because we made this decision. It didn't mean everything came easy. It's been hard. We've been building We&Company over the last 4 years during very turbulent times. And it just helps to fuel even more of why we do what we do.
Yeah. I think also like taking the bumps along the way, like embracing the fact that like, you mentioned earlier, like I'm a recovering perfectionist, and I sympathize and empathize and the whole ISIS. I do it all because there's times where I'm trying to do what I'm trying to do, and I've learned now for the past 3 years, I'm not going to get it like I want to because A, I'm one person. B, my wants and needs are always changing, and so I'm kind of just like I'm just gonna go with it and do the best that I can. Every now and then I kind of get caught up in it, but I have fallen back because it's kind of liberating to kind of just be like I'm just not going to be able to do what that perfect look, the equipment that I want, the angle, the way I really want to tell my stories. I've had to change it so many times because I haven't been able to do it because I just can't, because I don't have the time. I don't have the equipment. I have everything. So it's been like, you know what? Let me just take a step back and let me take these bumps along the way that I'm learning the hard way. I hate learning it the hard way. But then like sometime later you look back and you're like, oh, I'm kind of glad that I had that hard time. But 4 years of it, what is it about storytelling for you? I'm curious. Like I know we've been talking about it, but what is it about that part of like people being vulnerable enough to share things with you, and then you having that ear for it, that heart for it, but also like that creative mind to be like, this is how I want to share your story. Like, what is it about it that makes you happy? What is it about it?
Well, my mom would always say that we come from a family of storytellers. I was born down south in South Carolina.
Okay.
And I remember summers. I would spend my summers there. 4th of July was our family reunion, and my whole family, just us all being together, and the elders are at the table talking, the kids are listening or playing games. And I just always remember it was just, that was all we did. We ate, we fellowshipped, and told stories. And so, and the photos would go hand in hand. Mm-hmm. So my great grandparents' house, full of photos. My aunts and uncles always had photo albums. So I grew up just seeing pictures of people I knew or didn't know, and I would be told stories about them. And I didn't know at that time, like, it's not like I said, oh, I'm going to grow up and be a storyteller, but it's been embedded in me. And from the sounds of it, to me, it runs in me, it flows. And I guess as I got older, I wanted to understand people more. So I would say one of the big things for me that really kind of put me on this path was I was already doing photography. I started back in like 2000 in high school, just, taking pictures of frogs and rocks and flowers and like just still things, not people, but just still things. And it was very therapeutic for me, but someone asked me to take their photos and I started photographing people. But my father died in 2012, December 2012. And for whatever reason, I had a friend who did a 365 project where he took a photo every day.
Okay.
Every day for a year. And I remember around that time, I don't know where the decision came for me to do that, why I thought, you know what, I'm just going to take a picture every day. But after my dad died, I remember taking a picture of like the moon or something. And it was Christmas time, so of the Christmas lights. And those first few days after, I was taking pictures just of anything to kind of process. Because for me, sometimes when things are happening really fast, I'm taking pictures. It allows me to process it in my own time. Gotcha. And so I had decided, you know what, I'm going to take a picture every day for a year to document my healing process and to really explore what grief looks like. and what that process is. And I did all this research on grief, like, you know, there's the acceptance and the denial and the anger and all this stuff. And I told myself I was going to be open to all of it, because I thought if I leaned in, then in the end I'll be okay, right? Or at the end of this process I'll be good.
Yeah.
And so I took a picture every day for a year, and there was a trial with my dad. He was murdered. Sorry. I documented that whole process. And I remember it turned, so it's into 2013, and then 2014 came around, and it kind of slowly like dwindled off a little. But during that time, I was photographing strangers on the street, and they were just telling me their stories. People would just come up, either I would go up to them or they would come up to me. Very similar to Brandon Stanton's Humans of New York. I don't know if you ever.
Yeah.
So
that's one of my inspirations.
Yeah. Okay. So I remember when his photos were getting like 50 likes and like 25 likes. Like, I've been following him since like the beginning, and he would always say like, y'all can do this in y'all communities too. And that is what I was doing. And I just had so many words of wisdom to me. And I learned a lot about people. Because I was photographing people on the street, I encountered a lot of homeless people, a lot of unhoused people, or people telling me, look, and I was young. I was in my early 20s. So they're like, yeah, you just wait, honey. You just wait until you live a little, and then you'll understand the story behind my eyes. Because that was one of my things, is like, you can tell somebody got a story by their eyes. Like, you ever just look at something, you know, you can identify wise eyes. Or sometimes I was like, you know, I really like your hat, sir. Like, I have a photo of this guy. He told me to call him 007 because he was born on the 7th and his daughter was born on the 7th. Okay. And he had this cowboy hat on. I remember like a lot of random stories throughout the years, but having those encounters with people really helped to shape me and mold me. And it showed me a lot about the world, the human experience, how we all have a story, how some people were just waiting for someone to ask them their story. And I took that whole thing, that whole project, this 365, and I didn't feel alone. Like, I didn't feel alone. And it just made me more curious about the world, because I feel like with grief, it's easy to give up hope, you know, or to become bitter. And I knew I never wanted to grow to be this angry, bitter person, but I also kept being told and warned that, hey, you haven't even experienced the real world yet, or you think you know, but you don't know. So that really got me into storytelling as far as other people's stories. And over time, I started to explore more conceptual photography and more our themes or causes. So I was able to collaborate with other artists and able to tell stories around like the Black experience. And so, I don't know, storytelling has just always been, I couldn't see myself doing anything else. You know, I knew that media was definitely going to be my world between photography and videography. But I would say in the last few years, me just understanding the importance of preserving, because really this is about the preservation of history. Right. Jordan and I we say this a lot when it comes to We&Co. We say we believe in the preservation of history through people's stories, and being able to preserve the stories of our time. It's important. Like, generations are going to look back on this time specifically. When you think about it, we are only 20 plus years into the beginning of the 21st century. Yeah. So this is such a shifting, transformative time. And when we spoke about fear earlier, at one point I was just so engulfed in it. Like I wasn't posting, I wasn't sharing stories. Like we were doing the work, but we weren't,
Gotcha.
I was just so terrified of social media. And like I realized, oh my gosh, that was the spirit of fear that was keeping me from pursuing some of these things. And it almost made me be like, what's the point of all this, honestly? But I just know that there's just a call. There is a call on my life to do this, and I just that's what I'm here for. I gotta do it.
One of the things that I can relate to is like the excuse me. It sounds like to me, and I don't want to speak for you, but it sounds like again, I'm sorry to hear about your father, but that experience put you on a path that ended up wanting to embrace humanity in a way that maybe you didn't realize you were trying to do.
Yeah.
Where for me, it was the opposite, where I was curious about humanity. I wanted to embrace it. And then I ended up losing my dad, and it ended up showing me like, then the community that was embracing me in a way. But I was just like you, always really intrigued on like, and I get really lost in deep thought with it. Like when you just mentioned the whole 21st century thing, I go down rabbit holes because I'm like, my wife brought it to my attention. Like, you're giving people something that they'll always be able to share, that when they're gone, their family will always have. And I was like, well, I never really thought about that, but that is pretty cool, because when you talk about looking at pictures, like I remember doing that with my family growing up. It was, that every family had their albums and pictures, and pulling them out and looking at the picture. We don't really have that now per se, but it is like the sense of like 100 years from now, are my great grandchildren going to listen back? And I think that's pretty cool. That is the preserving history.
Yeah.
And I just find like that's just so cool. And it's like, wow, we're a drop in the ocean when it comes to that. But like, how many more people can we really interact with to really share that with? And not everybody gets it, but when people do get it, I think it's a pretty cool experience. Because I think like, and I'm curious like how your view on this, but like one of the things that I'm going through right now is like I know what I've been wanting to do with the podcast, but as I've been doing it, I've been realizing like the conversation is really what I'm looking for, and not so much the interview. And I can't get that with everybody, and I get it. But when somebody gets it, that conversation becomes like, wow, you know what I mean? And when you're able to do that, like when you've got people that are like, hey, I want to talk to you guys about doing something. Do you ever experience when it comes to your business, and then it comes to like your personal, I love doing this. Do you ever have that experience where it's just like, this is what I want to do, and then people may not be understanding of it, and you kind of just have to like, okay, well, I want to do this because you want me. You know what I mean? Like, because I kind of feel like if that was me, I'd be like, I got this, I want to do this, and they don't not that they don't understand them. Maybe people just don't see it the way you're seeing it. You know what I mean?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, there's a couple different ways with that. So we've had people say, hey, we want to do this, and we want to touch on X, Y, and Z. And they might want it scripted. I remember, we got hired to do something once, and it was like, but it was it was their process. It wasn't ours.
Okay.
So like, and I remember us being like, we're not doing that ever again. Like it took away from the experience that we like to give people when they work with us, and some of the authenticity away from it too. A lot of times when we're working with people just to get rid of a little nerves, because they always want to know, can you send us questions before the interview and all
Yeah,
this stuff.
yeah.
So we're like, look, we'll send some basic questions to get you in the space, like mentally, because just because we understand, you know, some people might feel a little anxious. So I was like, we won't send you a full list of questions, but these are the things we kind of want to touch on, talk about. Here's a couple questions you can expect us to ask. Like, so a question I always tell people is, you know, I love for people to make I am statements during their interviews. So I like, hey, list a couple adjectives about yourselves. So say I am, and then whatever that is to you. Some people really struggle with that. But and then I've also had times where we've had interviews and they were just profound, and then they'll look back at it and they're like, I said that.
Really?
I said all those things, or I was that open, or I was that transparent. And they're like, well, I don't feel comfortable with that being out there. But I'm like,
I never thought about that.
I was like,
but you were there.
Yeah, I'm like, you were there. You look, I'm just thinking it's just you being you, you know? It's just you being you and you flowing, which it is. But I also realized not everyone feels safe. So while they felt safe enough with me to share, not everyone feels safe sometimes sharing those vulnerable parts of themselves, which is okay. I feel like, you know, you can be vulnerable in safe spaces and where you have control over that. So I learned that too. And so sometimes I'm like, well, okay, I respect that and I completely understand. I do think that it would be such a benefit for people to hear these words because they were powerful, but I'm going to respect, you know, what it is that you want, because ultimately this is your story. So what you want out there, and sometimes parts of people's story, they're not ready to share. They may not be ready to share yet. So it's so many different kind of ways of working through it. And you know, even coming on here, like I didn't really know what to expect, but like the way we just flowed right into the conversation, I was like, okay.
That's what I'm talking about, though.
I was like, okay, so it was just like a simple inhale, exhale. And I think it's, while you can't necessarily get that one with everyone, I feel like though when you do, it's just, you know, it's really cool. But you know, I hope, and a lot of times some people, they have a story, but they may not have the confidence that they need to share it, or they may not feel comfortable being in front of a camera. So sometimes we'll say, hey, we can just do audio only and we'll take your pictures. How's that sound? You know, I can do that. Or people don't realize the power in their story. Or a lot of times coming across people who have never verbalized their story in real time. So we've encountered seeing people process their own story, and they say, like, when they say things like, I've never said that before, or I never thought of that, or I didn't realize I've done all these things in my life. I've never taken a moment to actually recognize it. So thinking about that now, I'm like, people get emotional, and I'm like, you know, that's what we're here for. You know, that's what matters. And how you shared how, you know, this is out there. You know, it's out there now, and being able to kind of look back on this time and just having that treasure, because that's really what it is.
Right.
It really is a treasure, because what are the first things we go to look for when someone we love is no longer here? We're looking for photos, and we're looking for videos, and we're looking for remnants, and we're looking for anything that shows that they were here. So I think it's just such a gift to be able to give to people.
In so many different ways, though, like you just said, like people notice in real time. They didn't realize their journey until they hear it. And I've had that experience too. That's like a separate gift that you're giving somebody before they even get to see the final product. They've experienced something that they weren't expecting, that gives them perspective on themselves. One of the things that I've appreciated is like giving people that perspective, and also kind of like, I don't know, just kind of like facilitating the journey on their time, but still being able to facilitate it the way you know it needs to be facilitated.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes you have to change it on the fly. Some people aren't comfortable with a lot of things, and I think what I've learned on my end that I'm curious. I'm picking your brain like crazy here because I don't. I haven't really spoken to anybody like this about this, but there's times where I've learned on the fly, like, oh, okay, this conversation isn't going to go the way I thought it was going to go. That they're giving me something that I wasn't prepared for, but it's still raw, it's still real. And like when one of the things I wish that people could see about themselves that's difficult, because not everybody has that ability to be vulnerable with insight, is like, yeah, you may not want to talk about these things, but man, do you not realize the family that you don't know yet that's coming, that will come, that's going to want to see that, or at least hear. Like, I would love to hear my great grandparents, talk about their problems for the day, just to be like, wow, you know what I mean? Like, I don't know. To me, that's just cool. And in my own selfish way, that's just cool to be like, look at that. Like they were dealing with crap too. You know what I mean? The humanity of it and like how beautiful that is. I love trying to facilitate that for people just because it just makes me feel good. And when people appreciate it, and I feel like, okay, well then the job well done. Like this can only get watched probably 5 times or listened to 5 times, but job well done. I'm happy. So I'm assuming for you, have you? You've kind of already kind of hinted around this, like the people kind of like on the fly being like, oh, like I'm not comfortable with that. Like you have to adapt your process on how you're going to deliver the story that you've received.
Mm-hmm.
You already in your mind, I'm sure, already have a way of how you want to go about it as you're listening, as you're recording, as you're and then to be able to kind of like, okay, we got to switch it up here.
Yeah.
How is that process for you? I know you kind of said that you're willing to this is your story. We're going to do what you want to do. But as a creative, how does that impact you?
So when we're working with a client and they hire us to tell stories of people they're bringing to us,
okay,
versus someone just comes to us,
okay,
so there's different ways we handle it. But I remember specifically, we had the client come to us and say, hey, there's this woman, we want to tell her story. She's told us her story, thinks it's a great story. We want to tell it. And we go through this process before we even do an interview. We do a consultation where we just meet each other. And we ask them, what are some 3 key things of your story that is important to you that we share? Because we know we have a limited amount of time to tell it and we can't tell the whole thing. But, if you could identify some key things, what does that look like? For some people, it comes easily. Some people, it doesn't. But I remember interviewing a woman who she had just left an abusive relationship. She was really starting her life over in all the ways. And as she's speaking, she's basically like, I don't know why y'all want to hear my story right now.
Yeah.
I'm still in the midst of it. I'm still going through it. Yes, I'm not where I was, not where I want to be, and I am surviving right now. And I realized, oh no, this person is actually still in like survival mode. This person actually hasn't even processed some of these things that has happened to them. And I've sat and met with people and realized they're actually not ready. And I don't even feel comfortable with,
gotcha.
Like, I'm not going to push. I'm definitely not going to push or force this. Because there's a difference between sharing like a vulnerable moment and just being, because that's what we did in the news, right? Like we're very, very aggressive, very pushy, very nosy, you know. I don't want to ever come off that way. And I had to shake a lot. I had to shake a lot of those qualities that I picked up working in news, because I had to make a conscious, like, I had to really be intentional about losing some of those traits that I also had picked up, because we're so used to quick turnarounds. If you call somebody and they don't pick up, you harass them till they do, because you need an answer. Or once you got an answer, you take your answer and you go. So then it would come off very like transactional. But in news world, it's like, no, you know something that I need to know. So I know, and I know that you know, so I'm going to call you. You're going to give me that information. Then I'm going to take it and I'm going to write this script and, you know, give it to the producers and do whatever it is. So there were a lot of things I had to unlearn when dealing with people outside of that space. And I'll just never forget this woman kind of like breaking down, telling me her story. And I'm like, yeah, like I'm gonna let you, this isn't what you need right now. And us making that, obviously, like her ultimately being up to this person, but I learned it from that sense too. But then when it comes to like creatively, like I've interviewed people where I'm like, you know what? I don't want to have to splice and dice this interview to make this work. So sometimes it's like, okay, we might have to either reshoot this or think of what's another way we can tell your story. Because I've had people, again, who they aren't the most comfortable. Like they'll tell us our story on the phone or on Zoom. I'm like, okay, this is Gucci. This is great. This is going to be good. And then we get in this setting.
Yeah, it's a different
and
story.
It's a complete bomb. And I'm like, oh, but say that thing you said, because it was so good. And we're like, you know, maybe let's just take it back a second and let's really think about, okay, you have this story, and clearly I can see, you know, you're struggling in this way. Would you consider this? Would you consider us maybe doing like a audio-visual story instead? So kind of like working with people to see what works best for them and being respectful of that has been a learning experience for sure. And I know in the beginning, I'll never forget this. A girl reached out to me and she had been a victim of sexual abuse, sexual assault, and she wanted to tell her story. And I couldn't do it.
Okay.
I couldn't, because it made me also have to confront a lot of things within myself.
Okay.
And it brought up a lot with me with some sexual abuse I had endured. And I couldn't. And I remember telling this, and we were a brand new company at the time. Like we were new. And I reached out to a friend. I'm like, hey, I have this person. They want to tell their story, but I'm over here triggered and I'm over here crying. And I don't know if I can do this. How can I help someone tell their story if I haven't even told mine and I haven't even worked through a process, you know, some of these things. And I remember a friend telling me, you're going to have to get on that then. Like you are in, because it's not about me, right? Yeah. It's not about me. It's not about us. Like if you're going to do this, there's going to be a lot of things that are going to come up that you'll have to remove yourself from and still be able to power through. And so while at that time I couldn't help her, you know, I redirected her like to some resources and everything like that. But I remember like, I don't ever want to turn someone away.
Gotcha.
Again. And it made me, like, I got into therapy, you know, it, not that I hadn't before, but it made me be more intentional about my healing. And especially in the work that Jordan and I are doing with We&Company. I mean, we're dealing with people, and people life happens. Yeah. You know, a spectrum from loss to grief. We tell legacy stories, memorial stories. We tell these wide spectrums of stories, and, you know, we can't shut down. But one thing that we bring to whoever we work with, to the experiences, look, you know, we may not know each other. I may not know your whole story or your life, but we know what it means to love. We know how it feels to grieve, to lose people you love, to push through, to persevere. So like that's because of that, how we navigate is different. Because there are plenty of storytellers out there, plenty amazing storytellers, and we always just tell people it's like the difference is just it's just us.
Yeah,
you know, we really try to do our best to honor those stories, but you know, we also recognize to do that. And it's not like I'm healing so I can do this. I'm intentional about my healing so that I can continue to walk this path and continue to walk in this purpose that I know that I have with when it comes to helping people tell their stories.
I think that's a really cool perspective that I never really thought about, but I have. I've thought about it, but not in that light. Because you're right, you're dealing with people and you're unaware of the triggers that may come up because you're unaware of what you are dealing with or what you've been keeping down low until it's triggered. I was asked somebody after I interviewed them, they were like, you know, how do you talk to so many people and hear so many stories? Doesn't that affect you? And I was just like, no, not really. But then I realized like it doesn't really until I've had an interview here and there where something's come up or the context of the conversation is so heavy that it's like, this is actually really affecting me. And it's just, I'm not prepared for it. I wasn't prepared for that. That in itself is also like the aspect of like what we as humans, how complex we are. You know what I mean? Like, that it's like, I do need to start taking care of some things. Then that in itself is like a gift. It's like, I'm grateful then for that opportunity. I don't know if I would have been able to address some things about myself had I not had that experience. But on the other side too, not on the other side, but I guess 1B is like for you to be, I can't think of the word, compassionate enough to be like, knowing that it's affecting you and being like, you know, I don't know if maybe I'm the one that can do this. You know what I mean? As opposed to being like, nope, I got a job to do, and this is what we do here.
Yep.
You know what I mean? Because
I could have pushed through and then like mid-interview been crying with her. So
I think that's honorable. One of the things I tell people too is like, you know, like once you give me your story and you leave, then I have this obligation here with it, and I need to honor it. Because you know, if you ever feel like, I tell people, if you ever feel like there's something that you weren't comfortable talking about, let me know. I'm not in this to be like, no, now it's mine. You know what I mean? I don't know. I feel like there's an obligation to like, I'm trying to do something by telling the story. So I want you to be comfortable with it as well. And I can appreciate that when the conversation right now, like what we're talking about, like hearing people and the triggers and the some of this isn't easy. It's a beautiful, sad, crazy experience. That at the end of the day helps me understand us a little bit more. You know what I mean? Yeah. You mentioned Jordan several times. Well, how did you and Jordan meet?
So, if you ask him.
Okay, so there's two different stories here.
If you ask him, he doesn't count the first time as us meeting as the first time of us meeting. But technically, the first time I ever physically laid eyes on him, I was, I think, like 14 or 15.
Okay.
I was a freshman in high school. and he's a year younger than me, y'all. So he was an 8th grader. But his god brother was my best friend at the time.
Okay.
So I would hang out with his god brother a lot, so we would always kind of cross paths. But years later, maybe 3-4 years later, my god brother was like, "Hey, you want to go over to my brother's house?" It was 4th of July, and I'm usually in South Carolina during the 4th, but I had to work. So I was like, sure, I don't have any other plans. And we went over to his house in Dallastown, and we stayed up all night watching Harlem Nights.
Okay.
Shot me in my pinky toe. And Jordan's like, "You never see Harlem Nights?" And I'm like, "No, I've never seen it. It was his favorite movie." And we stayed up all night watching Harlem Nights and just and talking. That was summer of 2009.
Okay.
And a year later, well, after a lot of dates and a lot of us not dating, in 2010, we started dating, June 2010.
Okay.
And then we got married in 2016, October 2016. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, but we technically met first on Duke Street, but he doesn't count that. So
What does he count? What is he?
4th of July.
Okay.
The 4th of July. Because he was like, that didn't really count. I literally came in your backyard and said, he literally came in the backyard and said, "Come on, John Moore." And then he left.
You were like, "Yeah, but I saw you."
but he did introduce me. And John's like, "Oh, John, this is he's like, Jordan, this is Shelby, Jordan." I was like, and he's like, "Hi, all right, come on," like paying me no mind. He had a girlfriend at the time, I think, and I think it was John's birthday party, so I saw him at a party too, actually. But yeah, he said he wasn't worried about me because obviously he had a girlfriend. But when we met again, I had just graduated high school, I think, by the time we saw each other again.
Okay.
And that's when he counts our first meeting.
Okay. Because that's when he had his eyes on you then, I'm assuming.
Yeah. And you know what? It was, I just remember feeling so safe.
Mm.
And I felt so safe with him. And I just felt, I'm like, I want him to be my friend forever.
There you go.
Like, I think I just met my best friend.
Hey.
Remember his stepbrother's like, "Are we just become best friends?" Yep. That's kind of
okay,
how
got
that
you.
was. But yeah.
One of the things that I think is cool too is with my wife and I, like, even though she doesn't do the podcast with me, she does the podcast with me, if that makes any sense. She's like right there with me. And I think it's cool if you're able to do something that you love doing with the person that you're in love with, married to, in life with, your best, you know what I mean? Like, it's easy to be so passionate about something and then have, and I've had this experience previously in my life, so I'll say this, have the unfortunate experience of not having somebody there alongside you, but not really understanding what it is, or not having that co-signing experience. But when you and Jordan actually have We&Company together, so what's that experience like? Like that you kind of alluded already. He has obviously a lot of experience on his end that he contributes, but as far as like what we've just had this conversation with about talking to people, embracing humanity, the storytelling, like what's that like with you and him, and being able to have that as a co-worker, partner, but also your husband and so forth?
Well, it's definitely been a journey. Someone asked me the other day, actually, did we ever see us doing this? So like when we got married, it's not like we said one day we're going to start a business together.
Right.
I don't think that was the plan for either of us. It was something that just organically happened because of our shared loves and passion. But in the beginning, it was very hard. It's still, we're getting a better flow now working with each other, but in the beginning, again, I tell you, I'm a recovering perfectionist. So, that means a couple of things. Things had to be my way. And I had to have control over certain things. And there's the constant of, okay, right now I'm not your husband. Right now I'm not your wife. We are business partners.
Yeah.
And we have to operate in this space right now.
Yeah.
But then one of our rules was, okay, business talk cannot be pillow talk. Definitely establishing some boundaries, which took us a while because we'd never done it before. It was our first time. We always had our separate, things.
Yeah.
So it definitely impacted us in a lot of ways, both good and bad, because, at one point the business became everything. Like for me, to wherever with anything else, we got to make sure the business is good, but not realizing, no, actually, spiritually we got to be good, mentally we got to be good, physically we got to be good, prioritizing where We&Co falls in the line of priorities, because ultimately, like, we didn't make vows to We&Co. We made vows to each other. I mean, we have like, our mission and, everything we want to do with the company. But at the end of the day, all of that can go because we are what matters, most. And I think when I spoke about failure earlier, I was in this place of being so afraid to fail that I became stagnant with some things, like I was afraid to post, or I was afraid to do this, or afraid to not make enough money. And that all really impacted us in so many different ways. There was the pressure of, of just overall providing our lifestyle, the things we could afford, the things we could do. And I think that with us working together, we got to see different sides of ourselves. And we learned so much more about ourselves too. We learned things we liked and things we did not like.
Yeah.
Because it is not easy working with your spouse.
Right.
But one thing we have both been so grateful for is the support that we can give each other because of our shared love and vision and passion for this, and because that we know. We agreed, okay, we're going to try this together. But like I said, in the beginning, it was Jordan, back up. In the beginning, I felt in my soul, right? When I said about that window closing, like Jordan wasn't having these feelings.
Okay.
Yeah.
Fair enough.
But I'm like, no, I was born for this. I was made for this, for a time such as this. It is now. And he's just like,
can it wait?
Cause we got debt. We got some debt going on. Could we plan some of these things out? Like, we a dual income, no children household.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
Let's just think about these things. So learning, I am very much I'm gonna go with the flow. Everything will work out. To me, I felt like God would not have put this on our hearts for us to do.
Right.
If it wasn't going to be seen through.
Yeah.
So, yes, these bumps and stuff. And Jordan's like, yeah, cool. But, so I'm very much go with the flow. And he's very much, yeah, we got to make sure these things are covered. And just like as a husband, you want to be able to do that for your family and everything.
Yeah.
So, it was difficult. It was difficult. But as it's gone into like our 4th year, we're learning again what works for us and doesn't. But I think even before We&Co, though, Jordan's always been such a supporter. And I know it might sound cliche. I'm like, I would not be who I am without him.
I dig it. Yeah.
But
yeah.
I really wouldn't, because Jordan has just spoken so much life into me. He's believed in me. And he was always the one giving me a prep talk, and just always encouraging me and supporting me in whatever it was crazy idea that I wanted to do. Even before the company, when I was doing some of my like own artwork or wanted to learn something or explore. And I should have known we was gonna be good, because we went in 2018. We went skydiving for our 2-year anniversary.
What?
Yeah, we went skydiving, and I only went because he went with his brother earlier. Jordan went skydiving twice in 1 year. This is his story to tell, but he did
Fair
do
enough.
it.
Wow.
He did it, and we both did it. I'm like, you know what? If we can jump out of a plane together, like, we can figure all this other
Fair
stuff
enough,
out.
yeah.
You know, we were both willing to, you know, subject ourselves to immediate like death, possibly. And we were fine. Everything was fine.
Yeah.
But you know what? It was the risk was so worth it because we got to skydive 15,000 feet in the air during sunset,
Wow.
during the sun setting, during all the rays of sun going in all these different directions, different colors. It was like, it was so beautiful.
Yeah.
So beautiful. And I love that we have so many shared experiences together, but like that's one that's always been just so special in our heart. So whenever we're feeling frustrated, just with the company, or, you know, we're both looking at each other like, well, what's next? You know, or allowing him to lead and allowing me to lead, and knowing when we both, where our strengths are and where our weaknesses are. So you do that as a couple, right? And then you also do that as business partners.
Yeah.
And, you know, sometimes I don't agree, sometimes he doesn't agree, but I know that I would not have done half the things I've probably done had it not been for him. Because again, like if when I have doubts, he will cast that out, you know, and he's just always been so supportive, and we've both agreed to support each other in our goals and in our dreams.
That's cool.
And you know what that looks like is different in different seasons, but you know, it's just crazy because when we got married, we did not think
Right.
we didn't.
This was in the.
We didn't think this was. I don't know what we thought, like, but it definitely wasn't this. So some days we're like, we're doing this.
Yeah.
Like we're working artists. You know, we are running a company, and look, I ain't saying it's been easy. Like it's not. Like months come where it's like, we don't have any projects. So what are we going to do? How are we going to pay our bills?
Yeah.
Or constantly looking for that next thing without getting burnt out. Right now, you know, we had a family loss recently, but life doesn't stop, you know? So we were like, we made a decision together. We said, hey, we're coming out of this. We were just coming out of this place, right? And we can't afford to go back into, you know, we can't give in to the despair, right? We can't give in to the grief. We have to keep moving. So what is it that, because we have experience in this and that, like, you know, what is it that we each need to do? Hold each other accountable, keep each other moving forward, and without burning each other out, and without completely like ignoring our feelings, but also keeping things going. Yeah. Because I think I told a client, like, hey, we had a loss. And like, oh, I'm sorry about that. So when are you going to get me this thing? You know? Like, and that's just the reality of it. And I'm like, okay, so you good today? How you feeling today? Are you tapping out for a second? Because I can jump in. So it's been really beautiful to see the different ways of like us ebbing and flowing between, you know, partners in business and partners in life.
I think what you just said there kind of like reminded me how we started the conversation off, where it's like, you know, I'm being able to know what you can do for people, but then also not forget, like, you also are a person. You also have a story, because you're right. It's a fine line when you're doing something that you're passionate about, that, and in your case, you and Jordan's case, you rely heavily on it. It's your passion, but it's also what helps you it supports you. You're living your life through it. It's this fine line of like, when do we slow down and give ourselves the time that we need to absorb life and all that comes with it. But then at the same time, like, we do have to keep going. We have to, life keeps lifing, as they say. But that support system, I know firsthand, and I'm sure you agree that aids in that ability to be like, okay, well, we do have to keep going. One of us, somebody ends up taking a little bit more for the other, and then it back and forth. One of the things I've learned is that even though I told my wife one day, I'm going to do a podcast, and she's like, okay. And I do it. There's times where my wife will suggest things, and I too am, I like control, and I like things a certain way. And I'm like, baby, you don't have any idea what you're talking about. And then like a month later, I'm like, nah, yeah, you probably were right. I've had that experience so many times.
Listen to the wife?
Yeah, but it isn't so much like I'm not listening to her. It's more like, no, but I have this vision and I want to honor it.
Yeah.
And I can appreciate where you're coming from, but you don't understand. I'm trying to do it this way. And it doesn't hurt when like, I'm like, I've done it before. I know it can be done. And then it's like, no, I'm learning that even though my spouse isn't 100% in it with me in the capacity that I am, they're still in it. And I need to keep that in mind, that my decision making and how I want to go about things affects her and affects my kids in this household. It affects the ebbs and flow, like you just mentioned, that I have to put into consideration those suggestions, that she sees how it's impacting me, and she knows me better than anybody. So I can appreciate that. I think it's cool when I'm talking to somebody that they work with their spouse. I had Evita and Solis on, and I asked them that, saying, how people see only what they see, and it's just like, y'all are doing it, y'all are killing it. It's like, yeah, but sometimes this ain't easy. There's times where I don't want to deal with them, but you have to make it work. And I think when it's with the right person, it teaches you patience, and it teaches you like, we can't wait to deal with, we have to deal with this because we do all of this already together as it is. We can't avoid each other. If we have a problem, we got to talk about it. And this ends up helping us out anyway. And we're better people for it. So I appreciate that. I always like asking my guests about their significant other, if there is one there, because that really is another side to their story that most people aren't really aware that they are prepared to talk about or wanting to talk about. And so it's almost kind of like, I like catching people off guard a little bit, because the conversation kind of goes, oh, we're going to talk about, and then I'm like, yeah, if you don't want to, we don't have to, because I don't force topics, but I just love hearing that story, because that is another side of people. Like, it's like, my kids don't think of me as, I used to be your age at one time, and then I met your mom, and you just think of me as this old guy, you know what I mean? But I too was a person, and there's a history here in how me and my wife met. And so I just love hearing stories like that and sharing them. I know you can understand that.
And I'm sure, Jordan would have his own version of how he would share it. But there's been times when it's like, oh no, we had an argument at home, but we got to go do this shoot. And I don't have a poker face.
Yo, me.
I don't.
I'm horrible at it.
You gonna know. And also because like, if you've ever been around us, we have something very special.
Yeah.
So when it's off, you can tell.
Yeah.
Like, I can feel. I'm like, you know what? We're not in a. You go over there. I'm gonna go over here. And let's just chill out for a little bit if we can do that. But it's navigating those times too, and now learning. Look, we can't do that, because it's not fair to the spaces we're going into, other people we may be working with. So, we're like, look, let's just talk about this. Like, we have our check-in days. Like, on this day, we're going to check in relationship wise, right? But on this day, we're checking in business wise. Like, what are some issues from this last project we had that you are, we're trying to be more intentional that way, because what you don't want is like resentment, right? That is dangerous and it's sneaky. And I'm like, yo, we have something we gotta talk about, and it can be uncomfortable, or might want to breeze past it. And we learned that to make it work, like we can't do that. And we've been together, what? It'll be 8 years in October, married, and 14 years.
Yeah, 8 years. You said 2016.
In June.
Okay. So
we've learned a thing or two.
That's your date, or is that his date?
It's our date. It's our date.
To wrap up my interviews, I've been trying to think of really cool questions that I think of as we're talking, and I'm not really good at that, because there's been some interviews where I kind of fall back with a different way that I used to end my interviews. But nonetheless, I got one here. Considering everything that we've been talking about, what's something that you've learned about people through this entire experience? Is there something that stands out to you when it comes to humanity and how people live, and what have you learned?
I've learned a thing or two. I've learned a lot. So I think the important thing is having hope. Carrie Mae Weems, she's one of my favorite artists. She said, even somewhere along the lines of, even in despair, there is always incredible hope. And when we think about our lives, our human experience, the things that connect us, the things that divide us, the things that we share, is some key things is love, loss, hope, sorrow, imagination, curiosity, these spectrum of words, but we can find ourselves in a lot of those things. But I feel like keeping hope alive is how we survive. I didn't mean to make that rhyme.
There you go. Yeah.
I'm a poet.
There you go. Shelby speaks.
Hey. But it really is, because I've met people who lost hope and found it again. And I've met people who have lost love and found it again, almost lost their life and fell in love with living again. And I just believe that we all have our race to run, and we all have our stories, and it's important to rest when you need to, but you have to keep running. And so when I encountered all these different stories of perseverance, right? We want to do things like this because we learn things about people, like, oh, your story is incredible. And not just, it's incredible because more people need to hear it, because people need hope. People need to see they can come back from this. People need to hear stories about healing, and people need to hear stories about grief and loss and love in all its capacities. And usually I feel like those are a lot of the core things, the core themes whenever I'm, hearing someone's story, they're telling me their story. And it could be of overcoming. It could be of just continuing to pursue, continuing to imagine. And I think that if more people would do kind of how we're doing, like just have conversations, like that's really the point of it all, right? Because, we all have our lives and go on about our days, and we all have our people, right? We have our support systems. We have our families, our found families, our chosen families, families we were born into, or the ones that we created. But, we all know love in some way. And I feel like to love someone and to know love, we can meet there, right? Like, I may not know you, but I have love for you.
Yeah.
And in a way that I don't want to see you hurt or suffer.
Right.
Or, so I think by talking with, just being able to interact and meet so many people in my life, it's just this mosaic of humanity. And I think ultimately we're just here to love, because there's plenty of things that will try to take our light, that will try to destroy us. I mean, there are people out here walking around angry and bitter and hopeless and are just barren. And that's like, that's an agony, that's no way to live. So I've heard too many stories of survival to know that I don't come out on the other side, to know that I will come out on the other side.
Gotcha.
And to encourage someone and to encourage yourself too. I hope that answered your question.
No, it does. I loved it because the reason why I wanted to ask you that question is because of how similar what we're doing, the similarities of what we're doing. And I often ask myself that, like, what have I learned? Because it's you're hearing so many different things, but it forces you, if you have the emotional intelligence to recognize it, it forces you to really reflect on things and put into consideration. And it takes me down like rabbit holes of like self-reflection and people that I've interviewed that are no longer here. That it when I said, that drop in the ocean comment, it's sometimes it's what it feels like. So I'm always curious, like when someone like yourself that's doing what you're doing, and you and Jordan both, like the impact of hearing these stories and meeting people and having that privilege, like what have you learned? And so, yeah, that answers my question beautifully.
I did have one more thing to add.
Yeah.
If you don't mind.
No, go for it.
That's what I learned from people. But what I learned with us doing this was I wasn't prepared for the responsibility. I wasn't like how you said, how when people come and share, like you're obligated, you have this responsibility to do something with it. I wasn't ready for the weight of it. And there was a point in time where I was being crushed by it, like to the point of I wanted to walk away, but I couldn't. I couldn't, because it didn't even sit right in my soul. I'm like, what do I look like giving up?
Yeah.
I don't even know what that would look like to give up. So I didn't entertain it, but the thought was there. But I wasn't ready for the weight of the responsibility of all these people's stories. And it did crush me for a time. It left me very stagnant and afraid. And so when we talk about stepping into your light and stepping into your power, it's a must and it is required, because I know that what Jordan and I are doing is so much bigger than ourselves.
Right.
And it impacts so many people. And the storytellers are the ones who really lead into this. Like, the storytellers are the one who tell the stories for this next generation, and we have a responsibility and an obligation. And there are people that, again, do trust in us to share their story, to remember their story, tell their story, and preserve it, to do something with it. And I really learned that with my mom. I lost my mom August of 22. She was writing a book called Moments with Mom, and it was about her being a caretaker to my Nana, her mom.
Okay.
So she wrote in a journal every day about different moments with my Nana, and she talked about the importance of caretaking and compassion and loving more deeply. And I would take the photos and she would write, and we would have our Moments with Mom Monday meetings. And so before she passed, I just at some random point, she was like, Shelby, if anything were ever happen, like, you got to finish this book for me.
Wow.
And I'm like, okay. And something happened, and the book wasn't finished before she passed. I'm like, okay, I have a responsibility to finish this for her. And it's not just for her. It's for my Nana. It's for the entire aging community to be seen and heard. It's a beautiful book. And I'm like, that's my mom's story and my Nana's story, but there's so many others.
Right.
There's so many others, and there's so many others that I want to be able to help. And I know that all of this wasn't for nothing. I know that me working in news wasn't all for nothing. Even with the passing of my dad and me talking to strangers and taking a photo every day, that wasn't all for nothing. And getting to, the protests happening. I found my voice during that time. I discovered a part of me that I always wanted to be. And even with my mom, I'm like, okay, this is a legacy in my hands. These are legacies. So the stories that we are sharing and capturing, it's so much more than just a casual conversation. It is a legacy. It's a piece of them. And that is weight to that. So I learned, like, if I'm going to, what is it? What's that? Too much is given, much is required, something like that. If I'm going to do this, I have to take care of myself. I have to be real with myself. Jordan and I, we gotta be on the same step. And there's too much riding on this. This isn't just about us making money. This isn't just about, having a business. It literally is.
Forgive me. I'm sorry.
It's okay. It literally is it's a gift. It's a call, and it's something that, I'm going to do my best every day to honor, because it's special.
No, but I appreciate that, because sometimes you can't get lost in like I have to do it. I gotta get this done. I gotta, I'm going through that now, where it's like I told myself I would do X amount of episodes and I would have every Monday night and blah 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 blah, and then it's just like, man, I'm burning myself out. And then sometimes my wife will be like, what did you talk about in the very beginning, and what was your purpose of doing this? And I'm like, yeah, I know, I get it. Don't remind me. But she's right, and I have to kind of like refocus and be like, it isn't about all that. It's I have my intention, and once you start honing in on that, everything that you do, when it's intentional and it's grounded in like just the good stuff, like like anything that's good, throw it in there. When it's grounded in that, I can sleep good at night. I always tell my kids, like, if you can't sleep good at night, you're doing something wrong. And so I have to remind myself of that, because I can get lost in the everyday shuffle of life. But I can appreciate that, and I'm grateful that you brought that up. I'm sorry to hear about that. Is the loss of your parents. I know we talked briefly before we started that you are currently experiencing the loss in your family as well. And so I kind of like I kind of go back now to when I asked you before, like when you're doing what you're doing and you're also dealing with real life scenarios that affect you. It's not like you are passionate about how the lawn, like you got your own like lawn mowing business or something. You know, you're passionate about something that deals with people and their emotions, and then you're also dealing with your own emotions, and so it's like the roller coaster of emotions that you go through. I genuinely my hat goes off to what you and Jordan are doing, because that part, I don't know if anybody really understands that, where it's like, I really just want to stay in my room right now and not go anywhere.
Yeah.
You know, because it's happening to me too, but at the same breath, I want to share your journey. You know what I mean? Like, when my dad died unexpectedly last year, 2 days after Christmas, he had a hemorrhagic stroke at work. So I found out he died at work, and I would always tell my dad, you're 60, you're in your 60s, stop working like you're in your 30s. My mom and my dad divorced, and then for whatever reason, my dad could never stop working, like he wasn't providing for a family of 5. I'm like, your kids are grown, Dad, you're remarried, and it's just you and your wife. Like, I never understood that about my dad, but I always respected it because he was very blue collar minded, and I grew up seeing that. But I always told him, slow down, dude. When he passed, it really forced me I took a couple months off from doing this because I was dealing with so much. But it was like this whole I have this desire to do this, but this whole thing is happening to me. It was a really complicated, I felt guilty planning how I was going to get back into the swing of things and grieving the loss of my father. I was
continuing going.
Yeah.
Like I got, like, it's just back to business.
It was really morbid in my mind. But then I just ended up hanging my hat on but everybody goes through this. This is a part of life. The having to go on. How can we do this the best way possible? Because it's not easy. But I could also go back too soon and not grieve and not mourn. But I can also stay stuck in this sadness. So I appreciate you bringing that up, because that is life. And it's the ugly, the beautiful ugly, if that makes any sense. It's something that I know, maybe one day I can look back at and be grateful for the things that I've experienced while trying to do something that I was passionate about. And then more so, maybe my great grandchildren can listen to that and I don't know, take something from it. Thank you.
No, thank you. Thank you. And, shout out to our dads.
Yeah. Well, that's it. I mean, I don't want to hold you up anymore. I know it's getting late. I'm grateful. Thank you. I think it was a great conversation. I definitely would like to meet Jordan. I'm going to have to start.
Yeah, you got it. Yeah. I'm telling you, bring Jordan on. He's special. I love him. But he's definitely he's a great time. So I definitely look forward for you meeting him as well.
Okay, awesome.
But this was so great. Thank you so much.
Yeah,
I mean,
no problem.
this never really happens, right? I'm used to being in that chair and asking 101 questions.
I dig it.
Can I ask you a question, though?
Yeah.
What is a quote you live by and why? That's one of my favorite questions. Go to. It can be a quote, scripture, song, motto, whichever.
It's all good. So I'll be very transparent. I think I was asked this once before. I don't have any. I don't have any that I know of by heart, if that makes any sense. I've read some here and there, and I've been like, that's pretty inspirational, and I love. But I can't right now off the top of my head. But there's one that I've always gone by that I wrote. I went the only reason why it stays in my brain is because I thought of it while I was going through a divorce, and I was at the low of my low. And it's what does it take for someone to realize what they so desperately seek has been in their possession the entire time? It takes a swift fall from grace. And I always just tell myself that every now and then. What does it take? What does it take for someone to realize what they need is right there? It takes that swift fall from life's good, and then all of a sudden, the carpet gets pulled from underneath your feet and everything falls apart. I don't have any. I'm a really weird person in that regard, where I don't study literature in that form, but I love it and appreciate it, if that makes any sense.
Look, it could be a movie quote. Shoot.
I can, there's a lot of things from the Rocky movies that I love, but I can't verbatim come off the top of my head with something.
What you just, you did though.
Yeah,
what you just said, that was.
Yeah, that's something that I've always.
That.
Yeah, I was at a really bad spot, dark, and I just realized, obviously I prayed and I felt that God delivered, but I also feel like what I needed was there the whole time. I just needed to look at myself differently. Which I think a lot of people, when they go through hard times, a part of their growth is recognizing who they really are.
Yes.
We kind of talked about the hiding behind the camera, but you didn't realize you were hiding behind the camera. It's really honing in on who are you. And when life changes and you're thinking that everything's going this way, and all of a sudden it's kind of
to the left.
Nope. Yeah. To the left. Yeah. And then you realize there were all these flags this whole time, but you just were ignoring them because life's going good. If you were to tell me, 11 years ago where I would be right now, I wouldn't believe it. I wouldn't believe it. I was married. My two oldest were my only two children, and they were, 6 and 10 or 6 and 11, somewhere around there. And then everything just went, whoop, and I thought, what am I doing? What's going on in my life? This isn't where I'm supposed to be. I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be, and I'm grateful. I guess that's a long answer. I'm sorry, it's long.
Well, thank you. Because I had to just get one question, just one.
No, I don't mind. I
Can't
love
help
when people
myself.
ask me questions. Yeah, no, I think what I'm trying to be better at is reading more. I think through there I'll probably start catching some quotes and some I'll put the tabs in the book. I always think that's cool when people do that, but I just don't ever have the time to do it. So, but that's it. But thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Thank you for making this space and for having me. This was so great, and I'm thankful for you.
Thank you.
I'm
Likewise.
so thankful for you and what you do, and you're phenomenal. And I'm so happy that you chose to pursue. That you chose to do this.
Yeah.
And you're impacting so many people's lives.
Thank you.
You've impacted mine just being here, because it's out here, it's going to be out here in the world now. And I don't get to do this often. People don't usually ask me a lot of questions. So I really appreciate when people take the time to. So thank you so much.
Thank you. That's it. We're done.
Yeah.
All right.